The Forgotten Myth. The Siluri Empire had ruled the stars for centuries. Their vast fleets patrolled the galaxy, ensuring that no species dared challenge their dominance. The Emperor sat on his golden throne, believing his people were the rightful masters of the universe. Among the young scholars of the Empire was Varnak, a historian assigned to the Grand Library of Silura Prime. He spent his days studying ancient records, translating old texts, and archiving forgotten knowledge. It was a quiet life, free from war or danger, until one day he stumbled upon something strange. It was a dusty, forgotten data tablet buried deep in the archives. The words on the screen were old, written in a dialect not used for centuries. As Varnak translated the text, he felt a chill run down his spine. The record spoke of a species lost to time, a race of warriors who had once challenged the Siluri Empire. They were not like other civilizations that had been conquered easily. These creatures, called humans, had fought with unmatched strategy and determination. It took decades to defeat them, and when the final battle was over, the Siluri believed they had wiped humanity from existence. Yet the text did not speak of total extinction. Instead, it hinted at something more unsettling. They'd vanished into the void, beyond the reach of any empire. They do not forget. They do not forgive. And one day, they shall return. Varnak felt his hands tremble. He had never heard of these humans before. If they had been a true enemy of the empire, why was there no mention of them in modern records? Why had history erased them? Determined to uncover the truth, Varnak took his findings to the High Council. The Council's dismissal. The Imperial High Council gathered in the Grand Chamber, a massive hall decorated with banners of past victories. Varnak stood before the most powerful leaders of the Empire, holding the ancient data tablet in his hands. He spoke with urgency. The humans were not just another enemy. They were different. The records suggest they were not completely destroyed. The council members laughed. Humans, scoffed Lord Krezor, a senior commander. A child's bedtime story. My ancestors crushed them long ago. They are nothing but dust in the wind. But the records are meaningless, interrupted Minister Zorvin, the Emperor's chief advisor. Old myths, nothing more. You waste our time, historian. Varnak clenched his fists. Then why would our ancestors record a warning? Why did they erase almost all mentions of them? Silence filled the chamber for a moment. Some of the council members shifted uncomfortably. Finally, the Emperor himself spoke. His voice was deep and commanding. Our empire has grown strong. The past is irrelevant. No one, not even ghosts, can challenge us now. Varnak wanted to argue, but he knew it was useless. The council had made its decision. Dejected, he left the chamber, his mind filled with unease. If the warnings were true, if humanity had survived, then the empire might not be as safe as they believed. A disturbance in the void. That night, in the Imperial Command Center, deep space sensors detected something unusual. A fleet. A massive one. Thousands of ships, emerging from the edges of known space, traveling in perfect formation. Their signatures did not match any known civilization. They moved with precision, their engines silent, their intent unknown. Siluri officers scrambled to analyze the data. One by one, they paled as they examined the images. The ships were unlike anything seen before, sleek, dark, and heavily armed. Then, a signal came through. A single message, broadcast across all Siluri military frequencies. The transmission was not in Siluri language, but the words were clear. The time of myths is over. We have returned. For the first time in centuries, the Siluri Empire felt fear. Humanity was no longer a forgotten myth. They were here, and they were ready for war. The arrival of the unknown. The Imperial Command Center was in chaos. Alarms blared across the vast control room as officers scrambled to make sense of the impossible fleet that had just appeared on their sensors. Admiral Axelroth, one of the most experienced military leaders of the Siluri Empire, stood at the center of the commotion, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. Thousands of unknown warships moved in perfect formation, approaching the outer colonies at a slow, deliberate pace. "Are they responding to hails?" Selroth barked. "Negative, Admiral," a young officer stammered. "We've sent multiple transmissions, but they refuse to respond." Another officer called out, his voice shaking. "Admiral, the ship designs, they match ancient records from the human wars." Silence fell over the room. For centuries, humans had been a ghost story, a forgotten myth of the past. But now, their war fleet was real, and it was moving toward the heart of the Empire. A deadly mistake. The Emperor himself was awakened in the middle of the night. His advisors rushed into his chamber, their faces pale. "Sire, we have a situation," Minister Sorvin said, trying to keep his voice steady. "An unknown fleet has entered our space. It is vast." The Emperor frowned. "Who dares enter Siluri space unannounced?" Sorvin hesitated. Then, in a low voice, he said, "Humans." The Emperor's expression did not change, but the room felt colder. "Humans are extinct." "We believe so, yes," Sorvin admitted. "But the fleet is unlike anything we've seen before. They are not attacking, but they refuse to answer our signals." The Emperor exhaled slowly. "Then they are cowards." He turned to his military advisors. "Dispatch a fleet. Show them that we are the rulers of this galaxy." An order was sent. The Third Imperial Armada, one of the most powerful fleets in the Empire, was deployed. 500 warships, more than enough to destroy any foolish enemy that dared challenge the Siluri. They moved toward the unknown fleet with confidence. The first strike. Admiral Selroth watched the tactical screen as his fleet approached the unknown ships. He had fought 100 battles and crushed countless enemies, but something about this felt different. "This is Admiral Selroth of the Siluri Empire," he declared over an open channel. "You have entered restricted space. Identify yourselves or be destroyed." For several tense moments, there was no response. Then a new signal appeared. It was a video feed, but instead of a face, it showed an empty, dark void, as if the sender wanted to remind them of something. Finally, a voice spoke. "You were warned. You were given time. That time is now over." The signal cut off. Before Selroth could react, the first human ship fired. A single blue-white lance of energy tore through space and struck the lead Siluri battleship. It did not explode. It simply ceased to exist. A moment of shocked silence filled the command bridge. Then, the human fleet moved. They did not charge recklessly, nor did they exchange chaotic fire. They advanced like ghosts, appearing and disappearing in flashes of light, attacking with precision. Selroth shouted commands, ordering counterfire, but nothing worked. Their weapons couldn't lock onto the human ships, and before they could adapt, entire formations of Siluri warships were being erased from existence. What was supposed to be an easy battle turned into a massacre. The galaxy watches in terror. The Siluri Empire had never known fear, but the news of the battle spread faster than light. Other alien empires, watching from the shadows, held their breath. The impossible had happened. The Siluri had been defeated in open combat by humans. The myths had come alive. And the galaxy would never be the same again. First contact and first strike. The remnants of the Third Imperial Armada drifted silently in the void, shattered and lifeless. Fires burned in the wreckage of Siluri warships, their proud insignias scared and broken. Admiral Selroth's final transmission was already spreading across the Empire. His last words, full of disbelief and horror, echoed across every military outpost. "We are not fighting an enemy. We are fighting ghosts. They see everything, they know everything, and they do not miss." Then silence. For the first time in 1,000 years, The Xilari Empire had suffered total defeat in a battle. The galaxy held its breath. The Emperor's fury. In the Imperial throne room, Emperor Valoran sat motionless, his claws gripping the golden armrests of his throne. His eyes burned with rage as he listened to the panicked reports from the front lines. An entire fleet gone. His voice was low, but the force behind it sent shivers through the room. Zorvan, the Emperor's chief advisor, swallowed hard. "Sire, the human fleet remains in our space. They are not advancing, nor have they made any further attacks. They are waiting." The Emperor's tail flicked. Waiting for what? Zorvan hesitated. He already knew the answer. "They are waiting for us to make a choice." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. A desperate attempt. Despite their crushing defeat, the Xilari refused to surrender. A diplomatic vessel, carrying the best negotiators of the Empire, was dispatched to make contact. They would demand explanations, demand terms, demand anything that would make sense of this nightmare. As the envoy ship approached the silent human fleet, its captain activated a transmission. "This is Minister Kareth of the Xilari Empire. We seek a diplomatic resolution." A single human ship moved forward. No weapons fired. No threats were made. Instead, the humans responded with a transmission of their own. It was not words. It was an image. A single holographic projection appeared on the screens of the Xilari diplomats. It showed an ancient battlefield, a planet burned beyond recognition, and in the center of the destruction lay millions of human skeletons, frozen in the ruins of their former cities. The meaning was clear. The Xilari had done this. Humanity had never forgotten, and they had not forgiven. The ghosts of the past return. The Xilari diplomats were left speechless, their bodies frozen with fear. Then the second transmission arrived. A deep, calm, human voice spoke across the channels. "Your empire erased us from history. You called us myths. You believed we were gone." A pause. "Now, the dead have returned." With that, the human fleet moved. Not toward the capital, not toward the Emperor, but toward every major military outpost of the Xilari Empire. A systematic, calculated, unstoppable strike. World after world, station after station, the Empire's war machine crumbled in days. The galaxy watched in silent terror. For centuries, the Xilari had been the absolute power in the universe. Now, they were nothing. And humanity had not even begun to take its revenge. The beginning of the end. From the shadows of forgotten history, from the depths of exile and ruin, humanity had returned. Not as conquerors, not as diplomats, but as judges, and the Xilari Empire would soon face their final sentence. The truth revealed. The Xilari homeworld had never known fear. It was the heart of a mighty empire, a planet of towering cities and unbreakable defenses. Its rulers believed in eternal dominance, in their place as the masters of the galaxy. But now, for the first time, the planet trembled. From the high towers of the imperial palace, Emperor Valoran stood motionless, staring at the star-filled sky above. They were coming. The humans, those myths, those ghosts, those forgotten enemies were real, and they were burning his empire to the ground. A message had arrived only hours ago. The human fleet had systematically dismantled every major Xilari stronghold. No fleet could stop them. No defense was strong enough. They weren't here to conquer. They were here to erase. The Emperor turned to Minister Zorvan, his most trusted advisor, his voice dangerously quiet. Where did they come from? Zorvan hesitated. He knew the answer, but saying it aloud would change everything. Finally, he whispered, they never left. A buried truth resurfaces. For centuries, the Xilari had prided themselves on their history. They had no equals, no rivals, no threats. That was a lie. The truth had been hidden deep within the imperial archives, buried under layers of classified records and forbidden knowledge. Few had ever seen it, and those who did were sworn to silence. But the humans, they had not forgotten. Varnak, the young historian who had once been laughed at for his discoveries, was now a prisoner in the palace. He had been arrested after warning the council, his words dismissed as foolish paranoia. Now, the emperor himself summoned him. Varnak knelt before the throne, his heart pounding. "You knew," the emperor said. His voice was cold, controlled. Varnak swallowed. "I suspected. The records were too vague. Too many details were missing. Someone had erased history, but not all of it." The emperor's claws dug into the armrest of his throne. He already knew what was coming. Varnak's voice was steady, but his fear was evident. The Xilari never wiped out humanity. They only thought they did. The room was silent. And then Sorvin, standing at the emperor's side, spoke the words that sealed their fate. The humans left on their own. The great disappearance. Varnak continued, his voice growing stronger. Long ago, during the human wars, the Xilari believed they had achieved victory. They bound human worlds, crushed their fleets, and erased their name from history. But he said, his hands trembling, the last humans escaped. They had vanished into deep space, beyond the reach of any empire. For centuries, they had been waiting, hidden in the darkest parts of the galaxy, evolving, advancing, preparing. And now, they had returned, not as survivors, but as executioners. The Shadow Fleet. An urgent alarm blared through the palace, breaking the silence. A military officer ran into the throne room, panting, his face drained of color. "Sire, the human fleet, it has arrived." The emperor stood slowly, his golden robes flowing around him. His tail flicked once, then fell still. "How many?" The officer's mouth opened, but the words refused to come out. Another officer answered for him. "Too many, Your Majesty." From the highest towers of the palace, the Xilari leaders looked up. And for the first time in history, the stars disappeared. The human fleet had arrived, not just in numbers, but in power. Their ships were nothing like the ones from ancient records. They were stronger, larger, and faster, crafted for a single purpose. This was not an invasion. It was a reckoning. The judgment begins. A deep, unfamiliar sound echoed across the planet. It was not a weapon. It was a transmission. A single voice, calm and cold, spoke to every living being on the planet. "You took everything from us." Images flashed across the sky, ancient memories, long buried, now forced into the minds of every Xilari citizen. The burning human cities, the cries of the innocent, the destruction of entire worlds. The voice continued. "Now we take everything from you." Then the bombardment began. The Empire's last breath. The first strikes were surgical. Human weapons did not simply destroy buildings. They targeted infrastructure, defenses, and key command centers. The palace shields flickered and failed. Xilari warships in orbit tried to flee, but the humans allowed none to escape. The streets of the capital, once filled with prideful citizens, were now overrun with panic and despair. The very empire that had ruled with iron claws now faced something it had never expected. Justice. The emperor's claws dug into his throne. He knew there would be no diplomacy, no surrender, no escape. The myths were real, and the ghosts of the past had come for vengeance. The fall of the Xilari Empire. The Xilari homeworld burned. Towering structures, once symbols of the empire's power, crumbled as fire and smoke filled the sky. The streets, which had never known war, were now filled with the echoes of destruction. The Xilari were not fighting for victory anymore. They were fighting to survive. But there was no survival. Humanity had come, not as conquerors, but as executioners. A throne of ash. In the imperial palace, Emperor Valoran sat upon his throne, his golden robes stained with dust and blood. His empire, his legacy, was collapsing around him. Minister Xorvan, once the most powerful advisor in the Empire, knelt before the Emperor, trembling. His voice was hollow. "Your Majesty, the shields are down. The human fleet controls the planet. He could not finish. Because outside the palace, they had arrived. A single human warship descended from the blackened sky. Unlike the Xilari's ornate ships, covered in symbols of their past conquests, this ship was cold, efficient, and unstoppable. It did not boast of victory. It simply delivered it. From the palace windows, the Emperor could see them, humans, clad in dark armor, marching through the ruins of his once proud city. They moved without hesitation, without mercy. And behind them, the banners of Earth were raised once more. The last broadcast. The Xilari Military Command Center was in chaos. Generals shouted over one another, trying to coordinate a defense that no longer existed. Planetary defenses had been obliterated. The fleets were gone. Even the Imperial Elite Guard had fallen in battle. Then, a transmission came through. Unlike before, it was not a warning. It was a final declaration. The face of a human commander appeared on every remaining Xilari screen. His eyes were calm, his expression devoid of emotion. "You erased our people from history. You burned our worlds. You slaughtered our ancestors without hesitation. And now you will understand what it means to be forgotten." Behind him, Xilari prisoners were lined up, their once proud uniforms stripped away, their medals scattered in the dust. The human commander raised a hand. The prisoners fell, one by one. The broadcast ended. The streets of despair. For the first time in its history, the Xilari homeworld was silent. No orders came from the palace. No soldiers stood to defend their people. The civilians, those who had once cheered for the Empire's endless victories, now hid in the ruins, whispering in fear of the ghosts that had come to judge them. Some tried to run. They were not allowed to. Some tried to beg. The humans did not listen. There was no diplomacy, no negotiation. Only judgment. The Emperor's final choice. In the throne room, the doors were forced open. The Emperor, his once golden eyes now filled with nothing but hollow resignation, watched as a single human entered. This was no diplomat, no messenger, no conqueror. This was a soldier, clad in armor unlike anything that Xilari had ever faced. The Emperor exhaled. "So, this is how it ends." The human took another step forward. His people had waited centuries for this moment. There was never any other way. The Emperor gave a slow, tired nod. "You were only a myth to us." A cold smile flickered across the soldier's lips. And now, the Emperor looked at the ruins of his city through the shattered windows. "Now, you are the only thing that's real." The human raised his weapon. And the Emperor of the Xilari Empire was no more. The fall of a civilization. The galaxy had watched the Xilari rule for centuries. Now, they watched them disappear. The Xilari name, once spoken with fear and reverence, became nothing more than a whisper of the past. Their grand fleets, their powerful armies, their mighty emperors, all gone. Humanity had not come to replace them. They had come to erase them. And they had succeeded. The new era begins. The Xilari Empire was gone. Its fleets had been annihilated, its leaders executed, and its people left to wander the ruins of their once great civilization. The mighty banners that once flew over 1,000 conquered worlds were burned to ash, and the symbols of their empire were erased from existence. But humanity was not done yet. They had not come for conquest. They had come to balance the scales. A galaxy in silence. The fall of the Xilari sent shockwaves across the galaxy. For centuries, countless species had suffered under the weight of the Empire's rule. Some had been enslaved, others exterminated. Entire civilizations had been forced to kneel, their histories rewritten, their cultures wiped from the stars. Now, those species stood in stunned silence as the empire that had once broken them was itself broken. But the question remained, what would the humans do next? Would they claim the Auxiliary's throne? Would they take the Empire's resources, its worlds, its power? Would they become the new tyrants of the galaxy? The universe held its breath, waiting for humanity's next move. And when it came, it was not what anyone expected. A different kind of victory. On the ruins of Silara Prime, where the Empire had once ruled with an iron fist, humanity made its final statement. A single message was broadcast across the stars, reaching every planet, every empire, every species that had once feared the Auxiliary. It was a warning, a reminder, a promise. We do not seek an empire. We do not seek slaves, nor rulers, nor kings. We have come only to deliver justice, for those who were lost, for those who were forgotten, for those who never had the chance to fight back. Let this be the lesson that will never be erased. With those words, the human fleet turned away. They did not claim the Auxiliary's throne. They did not conquer their worlds. They simply left, leaving behind only the ruins of a once great empire and the whispers of a lesson carved into history itself. The final judgment. For the surviving Auxiliary, there was no salvation. Without their fleets, their armies, or their leaders, they were nothing. The galaxy they had once ruled now looked upon them with hatred. No one came to help. No one came to rebuild. Planets that had once bowed before them turned them away. Former vassal states now hunted them like prey, eager for vengeance. And as the Auxiliary wandered the ruins of their broken worlds, they understood the true punishment humanity had given them. They had not been simply defeated. They had been forgotten. A new dawn. In the far reaches of space, the human fleet disappeared into the void, just as they had centuries ago. They did not seek glory or power. They had no empire, no need for thrones or crowns. They were something else now. A force that watched from the shadows, a reminder of a terrible truth. That history may be rewritten, but vengeance never forgets. And when justice calls, humanity will answer.